General Hospital spoilers tease that Kai's upcoming surgery at General Hospital is being urgently prepared, all the best surgeons. The most advanced technological equipment are mobilized to bring a chance of regeneration to a determined young man who once faced the risk of permanent paralysis after a serious injury in a football game. Kai, who has never shown fear, still appears calm and strong. But inside that look are countless unanswered questions. Everyone around him, from doctors to friends, especially Trina, put all their faith in the success of the surgery. But no one expected that. Before the scalpel had even touched Kai's body, another cut, deeper, more dangerous, was about to tear apart every relationship he had. During the pre-surgical tests, like any other major surgery, the hospital requested a comprehensive analysis of the genetic profile. And it was here that a quiet but unignorable detail began to emerge. At first it was just a coincidence in the blood profile. But then additional results gradually painted a surprising picture. Kai was most likely the son of Marcus Taggart, the veteran Port Charles cop. The stalwart father figure who Trina had always considered an untouchable figure in her life. This information, initially kept secret, accidentally reached a nurse, then leaked to the medical team. And just a few hours later, to Trina herself. The feeling Trina experienced at that moment could not be described with simple words like stunned or shocked. It was like the ground beneath her feet suddenly collapsed, and she was thrown into a weightless void where everything that had been certain suddenly became an illusion. She had always believed that her father was a model man, without secrets, without betrayal. And Kai, her friend, her comrade, the one who shared her fears and hopes, could now be the half-brother she never knew. Every memory between her and Kai, from tearful hugs to delicate, affectionate touches, is now tinged with a grayish hue of doubt and uncertainty. She doesn't know what she feels anymore. Is it betrayal? Is it fear? Or is it simply a deep hurt from being kept from her? For Kai, if the truth is confirmed, it will be one of the most devastating turns in his life. From someone with no clear roots, who used to feel alone and needy, Kai will have to face the reality that he not only has a father, but that he is also someone who is present in his daily life, in the same community. But neither of them has ever known each other as father and son. Will he resent? Or will he accept? What if Taggart knew all along but never dared to reveal it for fear of hurting Trina? And if Taggart didn't know, why did Kai's mother choose to keep it a secret for all those years? While everyone was preparing for the big surgery, outside the operating room, another surgery, mental, emotional, and historical, was taking place more fiercely than any knife could ever inflict. Every step Kai took from now on was not just to regain his legs, but to embark on a new journey, a journey to find his true identity, his true place in the world, and to confront his true feelings for Trina, who might now be more than just his best friend, but a part of the family he never knew. And in all the chaos, Trina was no longer the strong girl who had led her friend to surgery. She is a daughter facing the possibility of losing her father in a whole new way, not because he is gone, but because he may have lied to her in silence for decades. She may also lose the closest relationship she has ever had, not because of a fight, but because of complicated blood ties that push everything into the forbidden zone. Kai's surgery is, medically, a chance to save his body. But the truth about his bloodline could be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it could give him a family, but on the other, it could destroy the entire emotional fabric of everyone involved. If the suspicions are true, and Taggart really is Kai's father, Port Charles will never be the same. And Trina, strong as she is, will have to learn to accept that sometimes the biggest wounds don't come from scalpels, but from truths that have been hidden for too long, waiting for the right moment to burst forth and crush everything. Taggart and Trina walk a fine line between anger and hurt as they try to stop Drew from interfering too much with Kai's increasingly precarious health. While all eyes at General Hospital are on the upcoming surgery, which Kai believes is his last chance to recover, behind the scenes, an unspoken battle for control, secrets, and hidden truths is escalating at a breathtaking pace. Drew, despite his best intentions, is becoming increasingly aggressive and over-assertive. forcing drastic medical decisions on Kai without giving him time to recover emotionally or process the personal revelations. And when Trina, the person closest to Kai, senses something is getting out of hand, she doesn't hesitate to speak up. Taggart, with his former law enforcement instincts, quickly realizes that there's something more to Drew than simple medical care. Not only does he question the treatments Drew insists on, but he senses an unsettling force behind them. Perhaps a personal motive or an agenda Drew isn't fully sharing. And with what he's just learned, that Kai is likely Taggart's own son, his fears are compounded. This isn't just an anonymous patient in need of help, but a young man who could be his own flesh and blood, on the brink of death. Trina, already reeling from the trauma of Kai's secret identity, now faces a new threat, not from the truth, but from the actions of people who seem to be his allies. She feels betrayed when she discovers that Drew is meddling more deeply in Kai's life without consulting any of his family, without actually asking Kai, and instead using his power and network to dictate treatment. It makes her feel a growing fear, that if things continue down this path, Kai will not only lose his mobility, but also his autonomy, his choice, and worse, his life. The real shock comes not just from the fact that Kai might be Taggart's child, but from the way everyone around him, from the hospital to individuals like Drew, is starting to see Kai as an object to be fought over, rather than a person to be protected. Trina and Kai once thought they could get through anything together, but now, they're forced to admit that the truth about their bloodline changes everything. It makes every question, every decision, every action of those around him more complicated, more calculated. Taggart, the man who always kept his cool in dangerous situations, now has to suppress his anger when he sees that the person he once trusted, Drew, is the one who is subjecting Kai to a series of unproven interventions, turning his son's body into a playground for experiments. Meanwhile, Trina, whose heart is still broken by the shock of Kai could be his half-brother, has no time to process her emotions. As she struggles to stand in the middle, protecting Kai from Drew, keeping Taggart from reacting, and herself trying to keep her sanity from breaking down. The truth about Kai is big enough to cause every relationship around Trina to begin to crack. But now, because of that shock, she's the only one who can see the dangers that everyone else is missing. And it puts her in a lonely position where she's forced to shout for the world to hear. Kai is not someone's project. He's a person. The adjustments Drew is trying to make are no longer about medicine, but about power. Who gets to decide what? Who has the bigger say in the fate of a young man who's just learned that his life has been a missing piece for years? And as Taggart begins to dig deeper into how Drew is running the entire treatment plan, more and more irregularities are discovered, withheld documents, unapproved procedures, and most fundamentally, a lack of human touch. In a storm of change, crazy calculations, and tangled secrets, Trina and Kai, two young people who once believed in sincerity, are learning to be tough. Learning to protect each other not only from death, but also from the hands that are called help. Because sometimes, the people who want to help the most are the ones who make things worse than ever. And as Kai's identity becomes clearer, the question is no longer, who is his father? But, who will protect him when the truth is used as a tool for hidden ambitions? Kai is mustering up the courage to mend his relationship with Trina, the one person who was his only light in the darkest days, and who has been deeply wounded by secrets that he never expected to burst forth at the most critical moment of his life. After all the cracks caused by the revelation of his true identity, after all the moments of suspicion, anger, and confusion they both experienced, Kai has finally realized that he cannot move forward without Trina by his side, not just as a friend, but as part of his very survival. However, as Kai tries to mend the broken bond, a series of new adjustments in the landscape around him continue to stir up hidden calculations, making Kai's efforts impossible to proceed peacefully. The pressure of the surgery, the uncertainty of his relationship with Taggart, who may be his biological father, and the fact that Drew and the entire medical system are using Kai's identity and condition as part of a larger scheme, all make him feel as if he is no longer the master of his own life. And that has become a new obsession, a fear that is present every day in Kai's mind, fear of losing control, fear of losing himself, and fear that Trina, the person he loves the most, will never be able to see who Kai really is under the layers of stories, secrets and prejudices that surround them. He doesn't want to be a name in a medical record, a special case, or someone's lost child. He just wants to be Kai, the person Trina once trusted, once leaned on, once cared about. So Kai's actions begin to become stronger, more decisive. No longer the boy who was always wary of the truth, no longer the one who was afraid to face his own feelings. Kai now decided not to let anyone have the final say for him. He began to proactively approach Trina with pure, even painful sincerity, admitting his mistakes, accepting the distance, but still firmly pursuing forgiveness. In every word, look, and action, Trina could clearly see that Kai did not simply want to go back, but wanted to start over, build a completely new relationship, based on the truth, not secrets. At the same time, Kai also began to take drastic actions to protect his boundaries, refusing treatment plans that were imposed in a non-transparent manner, demanding to participate in the decision-making process related to his own body and future. This was no longer the Kai of the previous weeks, the one who only listened and obeyed what adults said. This is a new Kai, mature, broken but determined, ready to stand up for himself and his loved ones. However, not everyone is supportive of these changes. New complications begin to appear when some of the characters around him, especially those who have medical plans for Kai's life, feel out of control. Drew, who once looked to Kai as a model for the success of new rehabilitation projects, begins to react harshly when Kai refuses to be the highlight of a research program. And Taggart, despite his good intentions, cannot easily accept that Kai is acting like a strange, independent son who does not need him. It is in this overlap that Trina, who once felt heartbroken because Kai kept her secret, now witnesses Kai's transformation, daring to admit, daring to fight, and daring to love unconditionally. Although she herself is still confused and not ready to forgive completely, Trina begins to realize, the person in front of her is no longer the quiet boy, living on the shadow of the past. This is a real man, choosing to face the future with his own hands and heart. And when love is restarted amidst wounds, fears, and exposed truths, it is not only salvation for two people, but also a proof that, no matter how many troubles, obsessions, and calculations may happen, there is always one thing stronger than any event, that is our own choice to stand up, to love, and to become the person we want to be. Kai is doing that. Not for anyone else, but for himself, and Trina. Kai is entering a new phase in his journey to adulthood, a phase no longer dominated by a hazy past or a feeling of loneliness, but marked by clear, responsible, and courageous choices. After the shocks of his identity, after the upheavals that nearly broke his and Trina's hearts, Kai has now not only found his place in life but also begun to assert his voice and personal stance against forces that once seemed untouchable. And that is most clearly shown in his latest and boldest decision, together with Taggart and Trina, standing up to protect Portia from the hidden threat coming from Drew. Portia, a talented doctor and a woman who always puts the interests of her patients first, is being pushed into a direct confrontation with Drew, as he increasingly shows signs of abusing his power and interfering too deeply in the medical field in the name of reform, but in reality, to expand his personal influence. Drew is no longer the hospital's silent ally. He is turning patients like Kai into icons, living proof of unapproved medical interventions. When Portia speaks out against these unethical and inhumane interventions, she becomes an immediate target. And Kai, who Drew had recommended for surgery and who had been central to his miracle recovery plan, is the key to breaking or strengthening the battle Drew has worked so hard to build. The bond between Kai, Taggart, and Trina is now a united front, a true family, built not just on blood, but on trust, honesty, and mutual protection. Taggart, with his instincts as a former police officer, quickly realizes that Portia is being isolated in the very place she once was respected. Trina, with her sensitive heart and sharp mind, knows that if no one stands up for her mother, Portia will be pushed aside by a system that is increasingly cold, calculating, and inhumane. And Kai, who has just escaped the cycle of manipulation, is now determined not to just stand by and watch as the people he loves and cares for him are attacked by power and cunning. And so Kai makes a radical decision to end his partnership with Drew completely. He refuses to be a medical success in presentations and projects. He refuses to act like a role model to attract investment and media attention. He just wants to be himself, a person, not a product. But that decisive action creates a new wave of danger. For Drew, no longer the compassionate veteran he once was, is slowly revealing his darker side, a man willing to defend his ambitions at all costs, including destroying anyone who stands in his way. As soon as Kai announces that he is cutting all ties, Drew begins a series of elaborate retaliations. Medical documents are manipulated, negative rumors about Portia are leaked, random inspections are imposed. And there are even rumors that Drew is seeking to suspend Portia's medical license on ethical grounds. A silent but deadly war is underway. And Kai, a boy who only wanted to be healed, is now a true warrior, standing in the middle to protect not only himself, but also Portia's honor, Trina's truth, and the endangered dignity of an entire community. The bond between Kai, Trina, and Taggart is no longer a symbol of a newfound family, but now the last bastion against a new kind of power that is creeping into General Hospital, the power of control, of self-interest over morality, of cold decisions masquerading as development. And Kai, who has been silent, who has been evasive, who has been running from the truth, is now stepping forward, making a bold statement: no more commodification of another person's pain and body. But that also means Kai has put himself in a new danger, one where Drew, with his network of connections and influence, may stop at nothing to quell this resistance. And if the war really begins, Portia, Trina, and Taggart won't be able to fight it alone. Kai will face what he was never prepared to face, a fight that is no longer about medicine, but about the right to exist as a human being, with a voice and dignity intact. Taggart works to rebuild the emotional bond between Trina and Kai, two young souls torn by secrets, identities, and the rapid changes they were never prepared to face. As a father, but also as someone who has been lost in his own life, Taggart understands that love, if nurtured with honesty and courage, can be the only thing that can heal the cracks in her soul. And more than anyone, he knows that Trina needs someone who is not just there for her out of duty or status, but out of true love, someone who can see her, understand her, and love her unconditionally. In Taggart's eyes, Kai, despite his struggles with identity, his past, and himself, is the only one who can give Trina the pure emotion she has lost. So Taggart's actions were no longer the surveillance or warnings of a jealous father, but rather acts of quiet support, private conversations with Kai, gentle reminders with Trina. Even the way he stood up to stop pointless conflicts to protect the privacy of the two young people to have the opportunity to speak their true feelings. It was one of the biggest adjustments in Taggart's behavior, from suspicion and caution to opening up and becoming a support. Because he understood. If he did not step back and give their hearts a chance to choose, he would only add more wounds to the wound. But as Taggart was cultivating this relationship with respect and sensitivity, a countercurrent was forming, and this time, it came from Curtis. The man who once had an ambiguous relationship with Portia, and was a factor that deeply influenced both Trina and the internal decisions at the hospital. Curtis is having a clear change in his stance and emotions, causing the newly established balance to start to be violently disturbed. Curtis, who had been neutral, begins to interfere more deeply in Trina and Kai's relationship, not openly, but through ambiguous hints, through hidden pressure from his position in the community, and through strategic administrative decisions at the hospital, where Kai is still being monitored after surgery. This causes the connection between Trina and Kai, already fragile due to past trauma, to begin to be shaken by invisible forces. Trina feels pulled towards her duty and role in the family, while Kai clearly feels the judgment and skepticism that Curtis has always quietly placed on her, like an invisible stone weighing down every step towards happiness. And increasingly, Curtis's change is no longer an internal matter, but begins to cause obvious threats. Those close to him begin to suspect that Curtis is no longer in control of his true motives, that behind his dignified appearance and warm voice, a series of new calculations are gradually revealing themselves. Many people begin to say that Curtis's change is crazy, as he constantly makes contradictory decisions, goes against old allies, makes things difficult for Portia, and even tries to create distance between Taggart and Trina. What has made Curtis become like this? Is there a force behind him pushing him? Or is he himself being pulled into a vortex of power, where personal emotions are distorted to serve ambition? Taggart, despite doing everything to support Trina and Kai, cannot ignore Curtis's unusual behavior. And this is pushing him into an extremely difficult situation. Should he confront his former rival, now the one who has too much influence over his family? Or should he continue to silently protect Trina, let her choose her own path, despite the undercurrents pushing her away from Kai? The closer he gets to emotional changes and bold decisions, the more Kai realizes, if he doesn't stand up for Trina, doesn't speak up to keep this relationship, then soon, everything will be swept away in the whirlwind of old forces trying to maintain control. And Trina, standing between two fathers, one who fights with action, one who hides his true intentions, will be forced to make a choice. Will she go towards love patched with sincerity, or step back into a safe but binding place? The love between Kai and Trina is no longer just the emotional story of two young people. It becomes part of a larger battle, where what is pure and beautiful must fight for survival in a world of conspiracy and deception. And as that love is protected by Taggart, threatened by Curtis, and held by Kai himself with ever clearer determination, all of Port Charles will have to witness what is truly stronger, truth or power, love or control, freedom or oppression.